So this is my energy chapter, formerly the fitness chapter, video number 3. So, so the primary fuel mechanisms or ways we make ATP were the aerobic with oxygen, burning with oxygen in the mitochondria, fat and carbohydrate, and then the waste products were CO2, carbon dioxide, and water. And you make a ton of ATP. Those are the primary ones. And then the other one was anaerobic, converting glucose to lactic acid temporarily to make ATP. You're pumping the lactic acid into the blood supply to get taken up by the liver, converted back to glucose, so you can then either reuse the glucose for fuel or store it back into glycogen, either way. The third one is kind of like you only really use it when you need to, and that's the creatine pathway. So the body keeps this molecule called phosphocreatine. It has stored energy already built into it. And when you break down ATP in the body, and it's adenosine triphosphate, and the process of breaking it down, the body releases a phosphate which had energy that you impart into something else, either breaking something or building something. Well, you can get that energy back that the ATP lost. You just take it from creatine or phosphocreatine. And so the body can break down creatine, phosphate, and rapidly regenerate ATP. When I mean rapidly, I mean the enzyme, creatine kinase, can do 10,000 reactions in a second. That's so fast the body can regenerate ATP using this molecule. The problem is, once you use up your creatine, you're kind of like out for 24 hours. So what do athletes do? They take it as a supplement. Now, you do naturally make creatine. The advantage of taking it as a supplement is it won't make you stronger. It'll let you lift weights longer. And in theory, the longer you can lift, the better the workout you get, the more, intense development of your muscle tissue that will occur. Creatine's kind of funny. Many people will cycle on it for like 6 weeks to 8 weeks and then go off. There are ways to dose it, so you keep taking little bits all the time. If you take a ton of creatine from your diet, it requires you to consume a lot more fluid. It does put some stress on the kidneys. By the way, if you take a lot from your diet as a supplement, your body's cheap. It'll stop making it. So, it definitely does provide an ergonomic advantage in sports. It is legal to use among collegiate athletes. Most people use it. They use it safely. But I think you have to use it according to the directions. You will have to increase your fluid intake. So here's another way to look at it. You get on a treadmill, you're exercising. Look how old this slide is. It works. You're on a treadmill, you're this harried business person. So you're walking, you're burning fat and glucose. Are you making lactic acid even at rest? Sure. There's always some tissue in your body that doesn't get enough oxygen. Sure. There's a little bit always. But then you start to walk or jog on the treadmill, your ability to get oxygen to your muscle tissues drops. So you're still aerobic, but becoming slightly anaerobic. So your use of fat drops off because you're getting less glucose to mitochondria. Remember, that's where you burn it. And your use of glucose goes up. You're also burning glucose, but now you're converting glucose as well. And your lactic acid goes up. This is fine. The Cori cycle says muscles will make lactic acid, pump it into the blood, it gets to the liver, converted back to glucose, and then that goes back to the muscle. This is steady state. You can jog on the treadmill for an hour. If you decide to start sprinting on the end of your workout, where you're really huffing and puffing, oxygen availability to your entire body drops off. Your ability to burn fat and glucose in the mitochondria becomes non-existent because you can't use that system. You become completely reliant on glucose, converting it to lactic acid until the amount of lactic acid in your muscles, the amount of lactic acid in your blood, they actually call that a failure point, gets to some level, and you basically start to tire rapidly. Your legs start getting really fatigued, and in 30 seconds, they're screaming at you, and you slow down your activity, and you basically go from being anaerobic back to aerobic. That's how the whole system works. Another way to look at this is, especially for a sprinter in track and field, they launch themselves off the blocks using creatine phosphate, And if you've ever seen people leave those blocks in the Olympics, they launch themselves. That's good for 5 to 10 seconds. Then they're running really hard away from the blocks to get their speed up. It's all anaerobic. At about 20 to 30 seconds, they're getting their oxygen in. They have to back down their speed and get into some steady state, comfortable running pace that they can get enough oxygen into their body and burn fat and glucose. And they're not making so much lactic acid they shut the body down, right? So creatine to lactic acid, you cool the body down into a good pace, and then you're running for the next 1,000 meters using oxygen. You know, the opposite of this is long distance runners may run comfortably for 2 hours, and then they're sprinting at the end and trying to cross the finish line for 20 to 30 seconds, all out sprint, without shutting their legs down before they get to the finish line, right? They wait for the last minute to go anaerobic. So there's different ways to do this. And this just shows it even more detail. You can look at this if you want. Okay, so we'll end on this. What is the limiting step to all of this? Because even thin people have plenty of fat. If you are burning aerobically carbohydrate and fat, the only thing you're going to run out of is carbohydrate. And if you do, you hit the wall, elite athletes, at about 2 hours, and you start to slow down because you just don't have enough fuel in the body to run at the pace or exercise at the pace you were running at. So what do athletes do? They worry about carbs before, during, and after. You carbo load before, days before, the night before, hours before. Store as much glucose in your muscles as glycogen, flat out. During activity, as soon as you start playing basketball, start sipping on Gatorade. Now, you say, well, why can't I just wait till I get tired? Because it takes too long to get the glucose from the Gatorade into the bloodstream. You're trying to prevent running out. So you carbo load the night before. You show up, your systems are packed full of glycogen. You start exercising. You start sipping early. So maybe you don't ever run out. Runners will go to those little juice tables, grab juice, have goo packs in their pants, squeezing in the goo pack, chewing on jelly beans. Cyclists, of course, can carry water bottles and bananas and all sorts of stuff. And then when you're done exercising, we call that the window. It's a short period. Now, it takes about 15 minutes to start. But for about 2 hours, that's the best time to eat, ship, and store glucose as glycogen. You're basically using the window after you exercise to carbo load for the following day. Carbo load before, sip and drink and nibble during, and then when you're done exercising, it's Jamba Juice on the way home, pasta when you get home, in the window. You don't want to hit the wall. You don't want to run out of fuel while you're exercising. It can end if you're doing a triathlon, you're playing a competition basketball game, you're playing the whole dang game. You start running out of carbohydrate, you're going to be a disaster out there. You're going to be exhausted. And you can't fix it at that point. It's unfixable. Other than water, ensuring you have carbohydrates before, during, and after is the most important nutrient there is. You run out of water, you die. I get that. But protein and fat, they're not in play here. They're not in play. Aerobic exercise is a carbohydrate sport, period.